Hey everyone, tonight we're starting with something very simple. Sleep, or more accurately, how people slept in the Middle Ages, turns out to be a lot weirder than most of us can imagine. So before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for a gentle hum, and let's embark on this night's journey together. Before electricity, TikTok, and sleep hygiene took over, medieval people approached the night with a schedule that would confound modern melatonin enthusiasts. It's called segmented sleep, a natural two-part sleep cycle, neatly divided in half like an old medieval biscuit. The routine is simple. After the sun sets, most people go to bed early, falling asleep first thing in the morning. Then, after about 4 hours, they wake up on purpose and spend the next hour or two doing what can only be described as medieval midnight multitasking. This is not considered insomnia. It's just the way sleep works. The time between sleeps is considered practical, useful, and sometimes socially disturbing. People use this time to pray, read the Bible, tend the fire, or check on their flocks because nothing ruins your RAM cycle like wondering if your goat is still in the yard. And yes, this is also considered the ideal time for intimacy. Medieval doctors and marriage guides noted that the body is well rested and the mind calm during this period, which sounds like a polite way of saying too tired to argue. So if you ever thought it was romantic to wake up early to make your partner coffee, know that your ancestors had a very different standard. A second sleep would follow this period, lasting until sunrise. Everyone from monks to peasants participated in this nocturnal rhythm. Even literary figures like Chaucer mentioned it casually. That is to say, yes, even in medieval literature, people wrote about not sleeping properly. Curiously, modern science has suggested that segmented sleep may actually be more natural for humans. These two sleep cycles are consistent with how our circadian rhythms work without artificial light. So the next time you find yourself wide awake at 2 a.m., don't panic. Just whisper, "Oh yes, the clock has started," and go tend the figurative fireplace. It wasn't until the industrial age, with its factories, gas lamps, and growing fear of inefficiency, that people began to embrace the idea of 8 uninterrupted hours, as if sleep were a timed sport. In the medieval world, waking up in the middle of the night was not a failure. It was a routine and everyone had to follow it whether they liked it or not. Let's talk about beds, or rather their medieval approximations. In today's world, we obsess over thread count, memory foam, cooling gel, and whether the mattress feels like a cloud. In medieval Europe, beds were often little more than a pile of once living furniture, now flattened under the weight of poor sleep and unspoken regrets. The typical peasant bed consisted of a straw mattress called a pallet. This was actually straw or hay stuffed into a burlap sack if they could afford one. Otherwise, it's just straw on the floor, possibly damp, possibly taken over by cats. These pallets aren't comfortable, but they're better than nothing, which is the alternative. Straw is cheap, plentiful, and insulates well. It's also great at keeping insects, fleas, and the occasional hamster out, making for discreet and quiet sleep and exercise. If it itches, you ignore it. If it bites, you just move it around a bit and hope for the best. If a family has a little more money, or at least a strong back, they can raise the straw mattress onto a wooden frame. This doesn't change the sleeping experience much, but it does slightly reduce the chances of waking up with beetles in your ears. Linen was a rare commodity. Most people slept in the clothes they wore all day. Pajamas weren't really a thing, and neither was personal space. The whole family, kids, parents, maybe grandparents, all slept together in the same space, sometimes on the same pile of straw. If you got too hot, you could always roll into your cousin's crook. Of course, the nobility had proper beds. Large wooden frames, feather mattresses, embroidered sheets, and canopies to keep out the wind and, hopefully, the lice. These beds were so valuable that they were passed down in wills. You didn't inherit land. You inherited Aunt Matilda's suspiciously lumpy feather bed. But for most people in the Middle Ages, beds weren't exactly comfortable. It was a place that didn't freeze, that was far from the chickens, and that maybe, just maybe, dreamed of being rich enough to someday sleep on something that didn't creak or rustle. When we hear the sound of a nightcap these days, we think of a cozy little drink. Maybe something with whiskey, a warm fire, and a questionable decision. But in medieval times, a nightcap wasn't a drink. It was a hat, a real, tangible, often funny-looking piece of cloth designed to keep your head from freezing while you slept. You see, insulation wasn't a strong point of medieval architecture. Stone walls, drafty thatched roofs, and windows made of thin animal horn or oiled parchment didn't do much to keep out the cold. And central heating systems are called dogs, to keep your head warm at night, especially since body heat escapes most quickly through the scalp. Medieval people used simple nightcaps. These hats came in all shapes and sizes, but the most iconic version was long and pointed, like something you'd expect from a witch who worked as a chimney sweep at night. They are usually made of wool, linen, or any warm fabric that can be kept on without angering the goat in the house. For men, they are a practical accessory. For women, they sometimes serve as a coif or headscarf, both to maintain modesty and to hide hair that hasn't been soaped since last Lent. But beyond warmth, nightcaps have social value. In some regions, married women are required to cover their heads at all times. That's right, even when sleeping. And the cap itself can be embroidered or dyed to reflect the family's wealth or status, because nothing says success like going to bed with a little flag on your head. In more urban areas, nightcaps have even become a symbol of being off-duty. If you answer the door while wearing a nightcap, it's the polite medieval way of saying, "I'm not dressed for conversation." And yes, the nightcap means go away. Of course, nightcaps are often paired with nightgowns, which are basically loose-fitting robes. Think Ebenezer Scrooge minus the haunting moral lesson. Pajamas aren't sexy, but they are practical, itchy, and sometimes flammable. These days, the idea of sleeping next to a stranger is usually limited to overnight flights, overly ambitious camping trips, or the occasional bizarre Airbnb mishap. But in medieval Europe, it was completely normal and not optional. Say you were a traveling merchant, a pilgrim, or just someone whose mule gave up halfway to Norwich. You find an inn, a rare luxury, and ask for a place to sleep. What you get is not a room or a bed or even a particularly clean floor. What you get is a spot on an already occupied bed. Medieval inns functioned more like human dormitories than modern hotels. Privacy was not expected. If a bed was available, you would have to share it, often with complete strangers who might snore, talk in their sleep, or have a suspicious number of boils. This was not considered rude. It's just an efficient use of resources. Beds can accommodate 2, 3, even 4 travelers, depending on size and social tolerance. In larger cities, you might end up in a dormitory-like hall with rows of beds and absolutely no personal space. Snoring contests are not admissible. Elbow territory is fiercely contested. Sometimes men and women were separated, but not always. Some hospitals tried to divide beds by occupation. Blacksmiths with blacksmiths, clergy with clergy, thieves with other thieves. But usually whoever got there first got the stretch. And while this may seem like a nightmare to modern germaphobes, at the time it was an upgrade from sleeping outside with wolves, rain, and the occasional peasant rebellion. Worried about theft? Many travelers sleep with their wallets strapped to their belts or hidden under their clothes. Others sleep on top of their luggage, turning it into both a pillow and an alarm system. If someone moves your bag, it usually means you're about to wake up poor. Of course, the wealthy don't have to suffer this fate. Nobles traveled with retinues and camped in relative comfort or requested private rooms if their stewards valued their roofs. In the medieval world, going to bed was more than just pulling up the covers and falling asleep. It was a spiritual activity, a nightly gamble where the stakes were your immortal soul. People didn't just sleep, they prepared for the possibility of death. Hence the popularity of bedtime prayers. Forget the lavender spray or the calming podcast. Medieval sleepers often ended their sleep with confessions, hymns, and cleansing incantations in case they died somewhere between night and dawn. The idea was simple. You could die at any time from disease, fire, demons, or, most dangerously, over the age of 30 in 1247. So you better pray, not because it's comforting, but because hell is scary, and you don't want to show up uninvited, unwashed, and in a mess. A popular version is, if I die before I wake up, I pray to God to rest my soul. Sweet, right? except it's basically a legal document written by a 7-year-old admitting death is a possible outcome before going to sleep. Many adults have a whole repertoire of prayers for various threats. A prayer for when you feel guilty. A prayer for when you think the devil might be lurking in the rafters. A prayer to ward off the plague, but unfortunately it's old. Some even pray to specific saints who are known to watch over the sleeping, like the holy guardians who guard your soul at the club door. The truly devout monks, nuns, and nobles ended their day with Complin, a final prayer before going to bed. After Complin, they took a vow of silence, which was not difficult since everyone was exhausted, underfed, and a little afraid of the dark. Children were also encouraged to pray, partly because it's good for their souls, and partly because it gives them something to do other than wonder why the dog is in their bed. Parents remind them that angels are watching, which sounds lovely until you realize that it's not guardian angels but celestial surveillance systems. In short, bedtime prayers aren't about peace. They're about last-minute damage control. Think of it like medieval antivirus software. You hope it works even if you don't fully understand how it works. In the modern world, dreams are often dismissed as random nonsense. Stress, too much cheese, or your brain trying to sort through paperwork in the dark. But in the medieval world, dreams were taken very seriously, as in, with serious eternal consequences. Dreams are not just dreams. They are considered messages from God, saints, the devil, your guardian angel, or maybe that strange relic you kissed last Sunday. Some dreams are revelations from God. Others are temptations from the devil. Either way, you must pay attention and either write it down or confess it or fast for 3 days to be safe. Theologians, priests, and self-proclaimed visionaries have devoted an incredible amount of time to interpreting dreams. Entire texts are dedicated to deciphering them. Dreaming of fire can mean hell. Dreaming of water can mean purification or drowning. Dreaming of a man with a goat's head juggling fish, you'd better call a priest immediately and possibly move on. Medieval people believed that what happens in dreams is important because your soul is still active when you sleep. This means that your actions in your dream can reveal hidden sins or spiritual weaknesses. Dreaming about being a little embarrassed about stealing a loaf of bread. It could be your subconscious confessing to your sins of gluttony in real life or just hunger. But anyway, it's better to confess just in case. Monks and nuns often record their dreams and share them with their spiritual superiors. Some are praised for having sacred visions while they sleep. Others are quietly told to eat fewer onions before bed. Of course, dreams aren't just spiritual puzzles. They're also great plot devices. Medieval literature is rife with dream sequences in which knights encounter angels, demons, or metaphorical creatures reciting poems about virtue. Dreams are essentially the Netflix of the medieval world, except with more metaphors and fewer happy endings. The church is predictably suspicious. Not all dreams are divine, and some are said to be planted by demons to corrupt the innocent. If you dream of something unhealthy, it means that your soul is being attacked, or that you are simply sleeping too close to the smoke from the fireplace again. In modern times, some people let their pets sleep in their beds. It is a cozy arrangement, although sometimes smelly. However, in the Middle Ages, sharing a bed with an animal was not an odd personal choice. It's a heating strategy. Let's start with the basics. Medieval homes weren't really built for comfort. Stone walls, no insulation, drafts so strong they probably got their name. Central heating was called the family pig. In peasant homes, it was not uncommon for humans and livestock to sleep in the same room, sometimes in the same bed, and very often in the same haystack. Chickens roam free. Dogs curl up at your feet. Pigs snort softly by the fire. And if you're lucky, none of them bite you at night. It's not about affection, although medieval people certainly appreciated their animals. It's about survival. Animals generate body heat. They are warm, reliable, and, unlike some of their relatives, do not take up all the blankets. A large dog can keep your toes from freezing. A cow in the corner can raise the temperature of a room by a degree or two, which in January is a miracle. Medieval homes, especially those of the lower classes, often had only one room for everything. Cooking, eating, sleeping, and sometimes dying. Everyone, both human and animal, works with the same space. Children can sleep between their parents and a goat. A chicken can serve as an impromptu alarm clock. Hygiene. Let's not ask too many questions. For wealthier families, this is not common. Nobles do not usually sleep next to livestock, although they may still have small dogs in their beds. Not for heat, but for fashion and flea control. Some castles even had separate sleeping quarters for their favorite animals, because nothing says power like a dog with his own room and title. There are downsides, of course. Animals can be noisy, they can wander, and historically, they weren't known for respecting personal space, but medieval people adapted. A 3 a.m. kick in the face is just part of the bedtime routine. If you've ever had to share a room at a youth hostel and thought, "This is a bit too much," let me introduce you to the medieval monastery dormitory, a place where comfort is silenced by a vow of silence. Monasteries really don't believe in personal space or softness or fun. A typical dormitory is home to dozens of monks, all sleeping in a single large room, often arranged in neat rows like pious sardines. The beds, if you can call them that, are usually wooden planks, sometimes with straw mattresses if the abbot is feeling generous, or it's a holiday. You sleep fully clothed, not out of modesty, but because you get dressed in the dark at 2 a.m. Because praying is more painful than just going to bed prepared. The monastic uniform, consisting of a robe, belt, and slippers, is both spiritual armor and poor insulation. If you're cold, you layer up. If you're hot, no, you don't. There are no pillows, no privacy curtains, and absolutely no talking. Silence is enforced, not suggested, by the rule of Saint Benedict. If you roll over and moan too loudly, you might find yourself on potty duty for a week. Snoring, however, is a gray area. You can't control it, but if it becomes disruptive, God may still hold you accountable, or at least your cellmate will. Lighting is minimal. Maybe a candle. You don't have to see. You just have to lie still and not sin. That's the goal. Despite the austerity, monks believed their Spartan beds were training for the afterlife. Preparation for the soul's journey by denying it all carnal excess. Sleep wasn't a pleasure. It was a necessity, monitored and scheduled like everything else. Some monks even sleep sitting up, just to avoid any hint of luxury or daydreaming or traffic. Compared to this, peasant haystacks and snoring pigs almost seem like luxury. At least the pigs don't judge you. Talk about something that would horrify most modern sleepers. Waking up voluntarily at 2 a.m., and not to go to the bathroom or read a death scroll, but to pray. Loud, cold, candlelit prayers. In medieval monasteries, this was standard practice. Monks and nuns followed a strict daily schedule based on the canonical hours, including matins, the first service of the day. And by day, we mean the darkest part of the night, when even the owls are still deciding whether to wake up. The bell would ring, usually rung by someone with a short stick, and the entire dormitory of robed, sleep-deprived souls would make their way to the chapel in silence. And yes, fully clothed, for monks don't wear pajamas. The only class system they believed in was spiritual. Inside the chapel, by flickering candlelight, and to the echo of the stone vaults, they would chant hymns, read scripture, and try their best not to fall asleep standing up, which happens to be a real problem. There are records of monks being punished for falling asleep in the middle of prayer, usually with chores or more prayers. You fall asleep in matins. Congratulations, you now get to lead the next matins. Matins can last an hour or more. Some particularly enthusiastic orders have lasted as long as 2 hours. Imagine trying to stay mentally engaged while your stomach reminds you that dinner is a bowl of lentils and a moral lesson and your body is actively shutting down. After the ceremony, monks would return to bed for a second nap or, under stricter orders, go straight to study or manual labor because nothing says holy discipline like threshing wheat for 4 hours of intermittent rest. Why so early? The idea is to sacrifice comfort and dedicate the first, quietest part of the night to God, unencumbered by the temptations of daylight, warmth, or REM cycles. It's a powerful symbol of devotion. Or at least it is once you get past the numb feet, the candle smoke, and Brother Ambrose's off-key chanting. In the modern world, sleeping alone is often seen as a luxury, a sign of independence, peace, or simply the ability to control the blankets. In the medieval world, however, sleeping alone was considered suspicious, impractical, or downright unsafe. Let's start with the basics. Warmth. Beds, as we've established, aren't exactly warm. Stone walls and open chimneys did not retain much heat, and central heating was still a long way from many epidemics. So people slept in the same bed to keep warm, not out of intimacy but out of basic desperation for heat. Children slept with siblings, parents, and sometimes neighbors' children if they came to visit. It's like a sleepover, but no one asks if you want to stay. But beyond the warmth, there's a spiritual reason for sleeping in groups. Many believe that the night is when the devil is at his or her best. Alone in the dark, your soul can be vulnerable to temptation or worse, possession. Having other people nearby creates a kind of moral buffer. If anything goes wrong, at least someone will see it or catch the demon first. For children, being alone at night is practically unthinkable. Not only for comfort, but also because ghosts, fairies, and wandering spirits are all part of the night scene. Fairy tales warn of sleeping alone as a gateway to evil and spiritual danger. And unlike today's bedtime stories, these stories didn't end with hugs. They ended with disappearances. Even married couples often shared beds with children, servants, or strangers. Privacy was not a concept but a modern myth. In fact, the idea of two people sleeping separately in a giant bed was so foreign that it would have been considered wasteful or downright suspicious. In religious contexts, even monks often slept together. And if someone was assigned to sleep alone, it was usually for disciplinary reasons. Yes, in some cases, sleeping alone in a bed was actually a punishment. Medieval logic, solitary sleep was an opportunity for sin. Sleep in groups, be accountable to the public. The next time you curl up in your own bed with your own blankets in a room that doesn't smell like goats, enjoy the silence. In medieval times, you might have had 2 children, a sheepdog, and a cousin there with you, all snoring. If you accidentally fell asleep while sitting in a lecture, a carriage, or a dentist's waiting room, you might wake up with a sore neck and a deep sense of regret. But in the Middle Ages, sleeping upright was not an accident. It was a way of life. Some medieval people, especially the wealthy or the religious, chose to sleep propped up rather than flat. Why? There were a few reasons, none of which were particularly relaxing. First, there was a medical belief that lying flat was bad for digestion, the lungs, or the general balance of fluids in the body. In a world where doctors think a sneeze can rearrange your soul, this logic makes perfect sense. They believe that sleeping on your back helps prevent brain congestion, which sounds ominous, but essentially means not drowning in your own brain. Second, there are spiritual concerns. Lying flat is considered too close to the position of the dead. You don't want to embarrass God or, worse, attract the attention of the Grim Reaper by sleeping in the same position used at funerals. Superstitious? Sure. But when your local priest doubles as the community's health advisor, you pick your battles carefully. As a result, people often sleep partially reclined, supported by large pillows, bolsters, or wooden headboards that are the medieval equivalent of a lazy boy. Nobles sometimes propped their beds up with slats to maintain a semi-sitting position, perfect for digesting the evening meat pie or fending off sudden attacks from the devil. Monks took things a step further. In the strictest orders, they might even sleep sitting upright on a bench or against a cold wall, with only a hood over their heads to ease the discomfort. The issue was not health. It's about discipline. If you get too comfortable, you might dream. If you dream, you might sin. If you sin, well, welcome to your 5 a.m. confession. Needless to say, this isn't about quality rest. It's about virtue, discomfort, and slightly confusing theology. Forget about haunted dreams or goblins under the bed. For medieval people, the real monsters of the night were in bed, small, persistent, and completely oblivious to your prayers. We're talking, of course, about fleas, lice, and the unofficial mascot of the medieval bedroom, the bedbug. Let's not sugarcoat this. Hygiene wasn't exactly a strong suit in medieval Europe. Bathing was rare, laundry was expensive, and soap was sometimes made from substances that should not be named. Add to that the straw mattresses, communal bedding, and the occasional live chicken underfoot, and you have the perfect environment for an all-you-can-eat insect buffet. Fleas and lice were so common, they were practically roommates. Peasants had to deal with them every day. The nobility, despite their satin sheets and feather beds, were no exception. In fact, Some of the wealthier households had nitpickers. Servants were literally tasked with removing lice from their master's hair and clothes. Imagine that was your job title, master of the royal scalp. Bed bugs, meanwhile, were the silent assassins of medieval sleep. They hid in wooden bed frames, mattress seams, and even cracks in stone walls, emerging at night to feed like little vampires. If you've ever wondered why medieval people wore nightcaps and slept fully clothed, it wasn't always for warmth. Sometimes it was for insect-proof armor. Solutions range from mildly effective to downright crazy. Some households burn strong-smelling herbs like mugwort or tansy to repel insects. Others sleep with garlic, onions, or even ashes in their beds, which may not do anything to deter pests, but certainly keep the romance to a minimum. It's not just the physical discomfort. Fleas are often seen as symbols of sin or moral impurity, a poignant reminder of human depravity, and a poor choice of bed. Entire poems are written about fleas. Some are moralistic, some are strangely romantic, because nothing says I love you like, let us unite as the fleas that bite us both. So while modern sleep is interrupted by ringing telephones and streetlights, medieval sleep was more likely to be disturbed by scratching, twitching, and the subtle feeling that something was crawling up your shins, because that's how it is. We've all had sleepless nights, but have you ever tried sleeping while wearing 100 pounds of iron? No. Well, in the Middle Ages, some people did exactly that because apparently nothing says sweet dreams like preparing to joust while you sleep. Now, to be clear, most people, even knights, didn't sleep in full armor very often. It was hot, heavy, and noisy. Trying to roll around in chainmail was like trying to sleep in a knife bag. But in wartime or hostile territory, sleeping in partial armor was considered the safer option. Comfortable, optional, survival, highly recommended. A night on the campaign trail might involve just taking off your helmet and gloves, leaving your shirt or breastplate on in case the enemy decides to throw a surprise party in the middle of the night. There's nothing better than waking up to the sound of horses and having to get dressed while still daydreaming about turnips. In besieged castles, soldiers might even sleep with their swords or axes next to them, like some very fierce security blankets. Shields also double as pillows. And if the enemy breaches the walls, at least you won't have to get dressed. Priority. Of course, sleeping in armor isn't exactly restorative. Iron doesn't breathe, and chainmail has a bad habit of hurting your skin. Add in the cold stone floors, minimal bedding, and the snoring of your teammates and the crackling of torches, and you've got a sleeping environment that ranks lower on the comfort scale than an airport terminal. Even non-combatants sometimes wore light protective gear when sleeping in dangerous areas. Traveling merchants or sentries might nap in their gambers. Thick quilted jackets that offered little more than protection and cushioning than the moral support of prayer alone. And let's not forget, armor wasn't exactly delicate. If you roll the wrong way, you might make a loud clanging noise that wakes everyone else up and makes them think it's the end of the world again. In a time when night demons, bedbugs, and pigs weren't considered unusual, you might think sleepwalking was just another medieval inconvenience. But oh no, it's a lot more dramatic than that. In the Middle Ages, if you started wandering around in your sleep, people didn't just assume it was stress or exhaustion. They assumed you were possessed, bewitched, or had unfinished business with the Holy Roman Empire. Sleepwalking, or sleepwalking if you wanted to impress the local monk, was less understood and often feared. The idea that someone might get up from their straw mattress, shuffle around the room, and stare at the wall is less a harmless case of insomnia and more a demonic rehearsal dinner. Stories from the time suggest that people were actually terrified by sleepwalkers. Picture this scene. A man in a long nightgown, holding a candle, his eyes glazed over, muttering Latin he didn't actually speak while he walked past cattle. You'll think ghosts or heresy or both. And depending on your local priest, an exorcism may be scheduled before breakfast. Some believe sleepwalking is caused by bad moods, especially too much black bile, which was a common medieval explanation for anything they couldn't explain. Others think it happens because the soul is temporarily released during sleep, leaving the body free to wander like an unattended mule. To prevent these nocturnal adventures, people tried everything from herbal remedies to praying over their beds, hanging iron charms, or, in more rural areas, simply tying the person's legs to a chair. If that sounds extreme, Consider that some medieval homes had open fireplaces, knives everywhere, and chamber pots just waiting to be catastrophically knocked over. In a strange twist, there are rumors of people climbing onto roofs while they sleep. Whether these stories are exaggerated or not, the fear of dreamers jumping has led to barred windows and occasional theological debates about whether a person can sin while unconscious. Fortunately, most sleepwalkers just wander around, mumble, or try to open imaginary doors. But if someone entered a church while sleepwalking, the locals might take it as a holy sign or call for a cleansing ritual, just to cover up any spiritual undertones. If medieval life taught people anything, it was how to sleep through chaos. Church bells, thunderstorms, cattle bellowing, the occasional siege. To the sleep-deprived Denisovans of the Middle Ages, these were just background noises. Medieval version of white noise. Let's start with the bells. Church bells mark every sacred moment of the day. Sunrise, prayer time, meals, and of course the secular prayer time at 2 or 3 a.m. If you live near a monastery, your dreams may be soundtracked by the frequent ringing of bells. At some point, the brain just accepts it. The bells become the lullabies of an overbusy mind. And not just the bells. Storms are frequent and terrifying. Without weather apps or triple-glazed windows, you experience every peal of thunder as if the world might end. Roofs leak, windows rattle, and chimneys howl like banshees. Yet people sleep. They had to. Work didn't stop for lack of sleep. Neither did plowing, praying, or running away from Vikings. That said, invasions and apocalyptic events didn't always dictate bedtime. In the 14th century, people somehow continued to sleep through famine, war, and even the Black Death. When the death carts rolled in the morning, they were seen as a terrifying warning rather than a cause for panic. And if you don't wake up, some believe it's a mercy. There are even accounts of people sleeping through earthquakes, warehouse fires, and angry mobs. Sleep deprivation is normal and the body adapts. If you work from dawn to dusk, eat just enough to survive, and spend your days avoiding mud, taxes, and mental anguish, you'll sleep soundly. And then there are those who use sleep as a kind of escape hatch. Faced with illness, grief, or the fear that the world will actually end, something predicted almost every century, some people just curl up under a robe, mumble a prayer, and go to sleep. There's a strange kind of wisdom in that.